understand yet, which we're trying to do the best we can to educate them on this, is understanding the tax implications of what they get. So let's say Buffalo News gives them $500 to do an Instagram post. Well, you better save $92 of that, because you're going to be asked to pay that in taxes come tax day on April 15th. So understanding the tax implications of what they do. We had one student athlete who got a whole bunch of free gear. They just thought they got free gear. But that's actually taxable. It's a gift in kind. It's taxable. They didn't have the money to pay it on April 15th and had to figure out a way to work around it. So understanding the tax implications, how it impacts your long-term brand, the amount of time that it would take to execute the deal, and by signing this long-term deal, am I preventing myself from getting better opportunities down the line? If that makes sense. All right, who's next? Gigi.
Hi. I was just wondering, you kind of spoke on this earlier, but with the pressure that college athletes feel from NIL, how do you think this affects team dynamics?
That's a good question. It was one that we worried about. You know, it's one thing if you're all in it together. It's a whole other thing if somebody all of a sudden has enough money to buy a nice sports car or an SUV, and you're still, you know, driving your 1998 Ford Taurus that you had in high school. You know, anytime there's pay discrepancies in the workplace, it can change a dynamic. But actually, I think the student athletes are, largely speaking, taking it in stride. You know, I just got done watching the World Series. Shohei Ohtani made more money than Max Muncy, but they seem to be pretty happy at the end of the game when they won. So actually, the student athletes have dealt with it better than what we maybe anticipated on the front end. Brooks.
My question's more really on the side of roster building. How did you see, I guess we can use the Indiana football team as an example, NIL being used to assemble this roster, especially through the transfer portal and other things through NIL?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there still are two rules. There's a belief that there are no rules. There are two rules. You can't use money as an inducement to get somebody to come here. And I'll tell you kind of how that is. It all depends on how you read that one. The second one is you can't pay them to stay. So there still are two rules. What you can do is say to a student athlete, an athlete of your caliber historically has gotten paid this from our NIL. I'm not promising you that. The collective's not promising you that. But just know that Jalen Hood-Schifino made this much money when he was part of that collective. So if you become a point guard here, you can probably expect that. And then the other thing is the collectives themselves will often tell the public or the media how much money they have. So, you know, Hoosiers Connect kind of made it known when we hired Curt Cignetti that we had $4.5 million to spend on NIL. And so athletes, I think, are willing to take the call. Athletes and their agents are willing to take the call. You know, from a coach who's trying to recruit them, knowing that if they come to IU, they could probably get pretty good at NIL deals. Nice question. Let's go to Mike Bedron. John, you've been patient. You've been patient. You've been holding up your hand. You've been rubbing your hands through your hair. I know you're disappointed. You're my next one, I promise. So Mike, fire away.
Yes, Greg. I just want to talk about how NIL is affecting younger generations, starting now at high school. How have you noticed high schoolers starting to play in the NIL coming through IU as freshmen? Do you notice that high schoolers are negatively affected by NIL, or is there any effect that you see on them?
I don't. I do know that they're keenly aware of it, and their parents on recruiting visits will ask, like, what kind of NIL opportunities are there at Indiana? And so it's something top of the mind that way. The one thing, the one thing about high school athletes is it's pretty rare that you have somebody who, starting in 6th grade, knew that they were going to be this person and should expect it. Usually, you have a situation, we didn't get this athlete, but you get somebody like Braylon Mullins, who was unheralded as a freshman and as a sophomore, cracked in the top 250. And then with like an hour before he's about to play his senior basketball season, he's now a top 20 recruit. And so I think it's pretty late in the process that they expect to get some NIL. And I don't think the average kid on, let's say, the Bloomington South or the Carmel High School or the Munster High School or the Schenectady North High School team, is expecting to get money. Good question. John Burton, very patient.
Thank you so much for calling on me, and you have talked about this a little bit, but after interviewing a few players from the football team, they did all mention at some point in talking to them that the NIL money and the pay differences that you talked about have created a slight bit of jealousy, and because of that jealousy, some players seem to be losing interest in playing because of that toxic environment. And for those players that are experiencing that, what advice would you give them?
It's a good question. A lot of times the jealousy, I call it the Victor Oladipo problem. And most of you, I would assume, have heard of Victor Oladipo. He was really awesome at IU when you guys were like 9. But Victor Oladipo was not a heralded recruit. He actually had a pretty rough freshman year. The first half of his sophomore year was also pretty rough. He was kind of a turnover machine. He could jump real high, but he just didn't know how to play. And then one day it clicked. If you would have been with IU basketball at that time, Victor Oladipo would have gone from the lowest paid player on the team to a first-team All-American playing better than everybody was making a whole bunch of money who was higher recruited than him. And that creates some resentment. It's no different than a professional athlete. Let's say you're on the Browns, not to throw shade on those of you from Northern Ohio, but you're probably pretty pissed at Deshaun Watson making all this money and he's not playing well, and you're on the league minimum and you're in the top 10 in top 10 in the NFL in receptions. That can build some of that. This is where relationships with the coach are really, really important. Understanding the dynamics in the locker room, dealing with the problems when they're small and early, rather than when they're big and irretrievable, I think is a huge deal. I'm going to be a little tough on the athletes here. They're never going to have a job ever at any point in time where they're not going to think that one of their co-workers is overpaid and that they could get paid more. And so some of it, I hate to sound like the old guy, is kind of preparing them for life that way. Let's go to Cassidy.
Hi, thank you for coming today. I kind of have a two-part question. So my first one is, what were some ways athletes in college made money before the NIL ruling?
Okay. Cheating. Like getting paid when they weren't supposed to, I guess, would be one way. Sometimes they could work some camps. And then some, got, just like the rest of you, part-time jobs in the summer. So those were the ways that the athletes were able to earn money. What I felt that was really fundamentally unfair, I call it the Jacobs School of Music Natalie Portman issue. Natalie Portman was at Harvard. She studied drama, and she was in Star Wars, and she was making $20 million in the movie. But she was in their drama program. Imagine a rule that said, well, if you wanted to be in the Harvard drama program, you're not allowed to get paid for being in a movie, and how ridiculous that actually sounds. And at the Jacobs School of Music, if I have a kid and they want to learn piano, I can pay a Jacobs School of Music student $100 an hour to teach my kid how to play piano, but I can't ask Devin Taylor to give my kid a hitting lesson and pay him for it. Well, those two things are now flipped. They can be in commercials that earn money. They can run their own camps and clinics and earn money. And I think it's an idea. Its time has come. So I think it's really, really fair. Kanisha.
Oh, sorry. I think it glitched for a second. Oh shoot. Can you hear me? Sorry.
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. And then my second question is, what is your opinion on athletes having to get, oh well, you kind of answered that actually. Do you have any more opinions on how they had to get around the NCAA to make money pre-NIL, other than what you just
I think it was
stated?
unfair. I think it was unfair. Like,
Okay.
student athletes do not have the same rights as all of you. All of you can profit off of your name, image, and likeness. You can become Instagram influencers and make a whole bunch of money, but an athlete can't just because they're good at tennis or basketball. It made no sense.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Kanisha,
Okay, thank you. First, I want to preface with saying our angle was really thinking about NIL, how it affects athletes from smaller sports programs. So I think you touched on this lightly, but I was just going to ask you to expand on some of the challenges that athletes in smaller programs kind of face when they're trying to maximize their NIL opportunities.
okay, so the challenges that they face are a couple of things. One, they're not on television as much. So they can't go to a brand and say, sponsor me because I'm on television all the time. And that's actually a big part of the appeal of sponsoring athletes. That's why they put Michael Jordan in Nikes. It's not because he was Michael Jordan, it's because he would be wearing Nikes when it was on television. So that was really appealing to the brands. The other thing, Americans decided a long time ago that football, baseball, and basketball were their favorite sports, right? So, in non-Olympic years, it's tough for somebody in field hockey or wrestling to break through on that same level. So I think kind of just the viewing habits and the passions of people, and you ask somebody to get an NIL deal, give somebody an NIL deal so they can reach a larger group of people to help your business or product. So I think some of it's the popularity of the sport itself is a bit of a challenge. And then let's just be honest and fair, and this is my fault as much as anybody. It's not my fault, but it's just the world that I operate in. They get less promotional support than men's, women's basketball, football, meaning that they get fewer posters made that are in, the storefronts at Pizza X. They are not up on billboards in the same way. They have a student social media person rather than the full-time social media person helping build that brand. Video and photos sometimes doesn't travel on the road with those teams to kind of build interest in those programs. So less resources, not on television, and their sports are less popular writ large across America. I think those are the three biggest challenges.
Great, thank you so much.
Hey, no problem. Appreciate it. This one is dicey. Is it Lucy O'Donnell or Lucci O'Donnell?
Lucci O'Donnell.
All right, I nailed it on the second time.
There you go.
All right, so I think you might have touched on this a little bit, but how do local businesses profit off of students with NIL deals?
Yeah, and I say this with love and affection to all of you. You guys are impossible to reach. Just impossible. You don't read newspapers. You don't watch traditional television. You don't listen to radio. How do you advertise to somebody under the age of 25? And you better be able to advertise to people under the age of 25 in a city like Bloomington, where 40,000 up to 120,000 people who live here are under the age of between 18 and 25. And you guys spend a lot of money here in town. The best way to reach that group is by paying social media influencers to market your products, businesses, restaurants, and the like. And because the profile of a college athlete, probably it took you guys a while for most of you to build your Instagram following. Like, you had to post a lot, you had to share a lot, you had to create your own content, you had to meet new people. I met this person at a summer camp, so they followed me. And then I met their friend when I went to visit them, and they followed me. That's how you build following. Someone commits to the IU basketball program, and suddenly they got 5,000 more followers that they never met. And so they're valuable in the community to market to businesses. So if you're opening up a new bar or a restaurant, paying Malik Renew, Sidney Parrish, or Curtis Work a whole bunch of money to tweet that the food at their place tastes really good and a picture from your location is actually a valuable advertising asset. Nice question. Let's go to Austin Niehoff.
Okay, my question is, Janice, do you think that the Supreme Court decision encourages more college athletes to pursue a career in sports after college?
Are you talking which? There have been a lot of court cases in the Supreme Court. Which one?
Oh, the one that gave the name image, like them to be able to profit.
Yeah. So, what I think has happened, at least in some cases, is Miller Kopp would be one. We've had a swimmer named Cody Miller who's like a pretty popular YouTube person. He was actually an Olympic swimmer. They've been able to make a living after their careers are done, off this. And I think that's happening. And also for someone, let's say you're training for the Olympics, like a swimmer or a diver who's already graduated, they still have to pay to live here. They've got to find a way to make ends meet. And being an influencer profiting off of your name, image, and likeness allows someone like Jessica Barado to stay here 3 years after she graduates to train to try to make the U.S. Olympic team. So I think it's extended careers that way. One thing I know it's done is that there are a lot of athletes who are willing to stay an extra year rather than go pro early because they're actually able to make money. Where before, especially if they came from a disadvantaged background, they're like, I got to go now in order to be able to help my parents or whatever. Good question. We'll go to Jack and then Jackson. So Jack Alberson and then Jackson K.
All right, my question was, how do you think NIL affects the transfer portal and where athletes choose to go to school? And do you think it gives some schools like an advantage or even possibly an unfair advantage?
100% it gives schools an advantage. I'll get back to that. I think what's really happened is it's tough on mid-major schools. Somebody who's under-recruited, let's say goes to Ball State, and they average 19 points a game. They're like, I can do my room, board, tuition, books, and stay at Ball State, or I can transfer to Illinois where they're going to pay me $150,000 to play there. I'm going to transfer. So I think NIL has impacted mid-major transfers more than anywhere else. It also kind of shortens the patience of the backup. A lot of people were willing to stick it out to wait for the chance to break into the starting lineup before. Now it's like, it's a year, you haven't started me, I'm transferring. And I can get paid to do it. I might transfer to a school that's not as good at this sport as yours, but they're going to let me play right away, so I'm going to go do that. So I think that's happened. Yes, it's an unfair advantage. The argument that I would say is that the schools that already had an unfair advantage maintain their unfair advantage. Like, yes, NIL, Alabama has more of it than Wake Forest, but before that, Alabama had better facilities, better tradition, more fan support, higher paid coaches, and more amenities for student athletes than Wake Forest did in the first place. So I think Duke basketball, yes, has an advantage in NIL compared to Northwestern basketball. But they already had a better arena, better paid coaches, more national television exposure, and a better practice facility, and they chartered their flights rather than include commercials. So they already had a huge advantage. So I think it's just the ones that already had the advantage are just able to maintain their advantage. Jackson K.
So somewhat similar to that last question, do you think there's any way for smaller schools or smaller conferences like Indiana State that see success and then get that taken away to have some sort of staying power?
That's an interesting question. I do want to know the story of why the third picture behind you fell. I've got to know. I see the marks on the wall. You got two of them up, and then the third one, would you playing like Nerf football? Did you get too upset playing? Okay.
It fell down. I've got more command strips in front of me, and I just haven't put them up yet.
Sorry to teach you there. The staying power is going to be a challenge. Here's the other challenge. With the new television contracts, we've already seen this. Some people are leaving being a head coach of a mid-major to be a high-paid assistant coach at a high major. Actually, a former coach of ours on the football side, Kane Womack, our old defensive coordinator, became the head coach at South Alabama. Kalen did well. Kalen DeBoer becomes the head coach at Alabama and doubles the salary to be an assistant coach at Alabama and leaves being a head coach. So I think you're both coaching the coaches and players. So I do think sustainability at the mid-major level is really, really tough. A school like Butler, I think, got lucky. If they were having their early years of success, like 05, 06, I think Butler would have been gutted. But they were able to be good enough, long enough that they were able to get themselves into a major conference. So I do think it's going to be tough to be sustained. I've had a lot of dudes in a row. Let's go to Sophie Goin.
Hi, I was wondering what your thoughts were in regard to how or if gender affects NIL deals or a player's ability in getting NIL deals.
I'm glad you asked. When NIL first changed the rules, 14 of the 20 most marketable student athletes with the highest social media followings were female student athletes. I think there's a couple of reasons for it. Most of them very good. One of them kind of a tale as old as time. But 14 of the top 20 most marketable student athletes were female student athletes. Think about Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, Sydney Parrish, just in women's basketball alone. Libby Dunn and the Cavender twins were the most marketable student athletes in the NIL era, period. I think there's a couple of things at play. One, this is a generalization. I do feel like women, by and large, if you look at most influencers in the world on social media, women make up an outsized portion of that. So there's either a learned ability of some sort to be effective on social media that their male counterparts have yet to master. I also think that they're a better consumer audience. Women are a better consumer audience than men. So marketers have far more products that they want to market to women than to men. Frankly, like men dress up, it's just a tie. There's just a lot of brand diversity that's available to women that are not men. And so these people can become especially effective influencers. The third thing I would say is that many of them are at the top of the heap in their sport. Like we said, Lily King was the best swimmer in the world when she was here. So she's the LeBron of a person. Lily King and Katie Ledecky were swimming in college, and they were the best swimmers in the world. So they were the top of the heap in that sport, where I mentioned Trace Jackson Davis was the 300th best basketball player in the world when he was a senior here. So some of the sport-specific things really hit there. College softball definitely falls in this. College volleyball is off the charts how marketable those student athletes are. So I think there's that. The one thing that I would say is not necessarily a great thing, and it's a tale as old as time. There are a lot of weird dudes who just want to follow pretty athletes, and so some of them get an outsized social media following that way. But I do think the marketing opportunities for female student athletes are great and are only going to grow. Frankly, women's basketball outdrew men's basketball television rating wise last year. Caitlin Clark's WNBA games outrated the first couple of NBA games this year. So I think those opportunities are going to continue to explode. Good question. Let's go to Kyla Dummigan.
Hi, I was wondering if you could speak on how NIL develops athletes in a professional way outside of like the core of the field.
Yeah. I know we're all talking about like a business and that it's just wins and losses and money. But there is still the mission of turning young people into functional professional adults. If you go to the NIL landscape and you learn how to brand yourself, you learn how to present yourself in public, you learn about taxes, you learn how to run a business, those are extraordinarily valuable tools that will put them ahead of the game when they get into the workforce. So I think it could be an excellent training ground. I mean, it's like the world's coolest group project for them. I mean, it gets them ready for the professional world. And that's why it's important to kind of help them along the way. Like, hey, you do have 2 Instagram posts where there are a bunch of liquor bottles in the background. Your profile picture is a picture of Kobe Bryant. Maybe you make it yourself so that people know that they're finding you. Your your awesome dog hot sauce 23 is your handle. How about actually making it Miles Rice? Some people can find Miles Rice. So even giving them social media best practices, I think, are important tools. I think all of that really helps them grow. Oliver Carr's been super patient. Oliver, fire away. And Eva, you are next.
Thank you. Throughout my reporting, I found that while a lot of students have like a generally positive opinion of NIL, those of an older vintage have an overwhelmingly negative opinion of NIL. Why do you think that is? And as a follow-up, like, how much does a lack of information contribute to that?
Great question. And I promise you, in the 90s and early 2000s, I had your hair. You have amazing hair. I mean, the flow is great. I think young people have grown up in a world where people are supposed to make money off of social media. Like, on some level, social media stars are the equal of pop stars, athletes, and movie stars to young people. So I think it's just an environment that you're very comfortable in. I also think that old people, by and large, and I know I am now in this group, resent things that are easier for their kids and pretend things are worse with young people than they actually are. You know, like sometimes I'll actually even say that. It's like, I mean, can they even go on a car ride for 5 minutes without checking their phone? I just say that because I'm a cranky old guy and I didn't have a phone to check. But we did all sorts of terrible things when we were young that kids today are a lot better at. So I think some of it's just natural crankiness of old people. I think some of it is a concern that I think is ill-founded, to your point of a lack of information, that it's going to ruin the purity of the sport. That they love the idea that they went to IU and they're rooting for people who are students at IU, and now they're quasi-professionals. But the Olympics used to be that way too. So there was a woman named Mary Lou Retton, who was the Simone Biles of her time. She won the Olympic gold medal in gymnastics, the all-around gold medal, in '84. And then she turned professional after the Olympics and was never allowed to be in the Olympics again. You had to be amateur. Well, they loved Mary Lou Retton. Well, everybody loves Simone Biles. She's a multi-millionaire. It did not change anybody's passion. So I think people are worried about something that won't be true. We're paying the collectives are paying the student athletes a lot at football. And I've never seen old people cheer louder for a football team in my 20 years working here than last Saturday. So I think a lot of it's ill-founded. But a lot of old people are just cranky if something's better for kids than what they had. By the way, you guys will be that way too. Like my grandchildren, I have holograms, and all you guys will be bitching about it. That'll 100% take place. Eva, I've been dying to hear from you. You've been super patient.
Well, thank you. I just wondered, earlier you mentioned that the rate of transferring has like really gone up among students. Also, I'm sorry, you can hear my voice echoing in the background. But I wondered if you think that would cause kind of a lack of like loyalty and passion for their team, and if that will carry on beyond college, like into the world of professional sports, and if we'll see like more transferring rates and just, I don't know, always looking for something better and having a every man for himself kind of attitude.
I think this is where old cranks like me have a bit of a point in that if somebody's transferred 3 times, it might be a telltale sign that there's a challenge, like they don't like to be coached, or they want to play all the time, or the dad is crazy, or crazy youth sport parent type stuff. I'm not saying that's all the time. One thing is, here at IU, I am not going to list the bad examples of this. I will list the 2 very good, very prominent examples of this. There are coaches who do a great job of integrating the transfers into their established culture, and it's an additive. Terry Morin should be like on every panel discussion ever, because here are her transfers. Allie Patberg, All-American. Sydney Parrish, 15 points, 8 rebounds a game. She had Nicole Cardenio-Hillary transfer here. She became a 2-year starter at point guard on an Elite 8 team. It seems this young woman, Shea Chesney, who's transferred in, has done an amazing job. Terry Morin brings these people in and then gets them to fit in with the culture that the Grace Bergers and Mackenzie Holmeses have already established. It seems that Kurt Signetti has done the exact same thing. Teams that are teams full of kind of mercenaries, I just transferred because I didn't get to play or you guys are paying more. Those we've noticed have struggled out of the gate a little bit. It's tough to build a team culture, a brand new one every single year. And what we're finding too is a lot of people are entering the transfer portal and then don't find a home, or they find a place worse than what they left. So there is a downside to jumping off the diving board that much and that often. And you worry about that a little bit too. And you know, you play 4 years here, even if you're a backup. Think about we'll go back to Anthony Leal. Anthony Leal will be loved in the community forever. He's a 4-year player here. You're in a different place every year. You might be an athlete without a home. That's my. I've been young guy this whole time, but that's my old guy take. Ty, I just want to say it. Lake Donato.
Close enough.
All right. Fire away, Ty.
Do you think that new recruits will choose a school based on getting more NIL money or the likelihood that they will win a national championship? So basically, like, do you think student athletes value the money more than a championship?
Ooh, I think that this is the Cardinals' worst non-answer. I think you have a clear divide. I can tell you this, as somebody who sits on the other side of the desk as this normal athlete sometimes, you definitely want in your program the one that wants to win the national championship more than the one who came here because they thought they'd get paid the most. So I bet it divides pretty evenly that way.
All right, thank you.
Veronica Tucker.
Hi, Jeremy. Can you hear me?
Yes. I mean, it looks like you're a fan. We got flags. We got pennants. I mean, you bought your season tickets.
What can I say? My question is kind of general, but how do you think NIL opportunities have changed the way college students approach their personal brand and public image?
I'd say mostly in positive ways. Like I said, I think they're like, okay, that tweet I sent as a sophomore in high school has got to go. That one aged pretty badly. Or they'll clean up some things. They'll be mindful of their behavior. I think they have maybe a greater understanding than the average student that everybody on planet Earth now is a reporter. So if you act like a fool at upstairs, somebody's gonna, film it on their phone and they're in trouble. I think they're conscious of their image that way. So I think that's been really, really positive. I think they're also very scared. And I think this is a mental health thing that's more than the NIL for a student athlete. They read the hate, and I think they realize that if they screw up, people are going to be pretty merciless, especially on that trash heap called X or Twitter. So I think they're mindful of kind of the behavior in public, maybe to a higher degree than they used to be. Negatively, sometimes they want to bring kind of hangers on with the places, like, oh, this is my creative team or whatever, and it can get a little much and be frustrating for coaches. And sometimes I don't have a feel for the room, like, hey, you're on a high-profile team here, you've lost 4 games in a row, everybody wants to fire your coach. Maybe this is not the time to do the dancey, jokey, carpool karaoke video, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
All right. I'm not saying that you're the one who posts mean things about them. Jack Height.
Hi, I was wondering if you could change one thing about NIL, what would that be?
Yeah, one thing I'd like a full disclosure. I'd like a database nationally. There are a lot of false promises out there where they'll promise somebody $100,000 if they come to their school when they only pay them $4. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? Turn us in? You're not allowed to come here for money. What are you doing? Like, it's kind of like mafia rules. And so there's a database where every NIL deal has to be covered. And I know people are uncomfortable disclosing, how much money they made. But Professor Layton and I every July 1st, anybody who works at IU can find out whether we got a pay increase or not on the IU salary database. It's just maybe the cost of being a public figure, and professional athletes contracts are pretty much public all the time. I just think if everybody knew what everybody was making at every place, the bad actors who make false promises, who abuse and manipulate kids for ill-gotten means, I think that would clear up. I just feel like the sunlight would be a disinfectant that way. I appreciate you asking that one. No one really asked, like, how can we make it better questions, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, is it Nevia?
It's Nevaeh.
Nevaeh, lovely name. Fire away, Nevaeh, and then I'll
Thank
get you the question, Laura. Nevaeh,
My question is, do you think you have seen any differences in how male and female athletes approach NIL?
yes. I think, and I promise I'm not saying this because I'm talking to a woman here. I think the men feel more entitled. Why don't you give this to them? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm on the basketball team, pay me. You know? I'm on the football, and I'm not throwing our football players under the bus. It's more like kind of what's the minimum I can do and get an A in the class type of mentality that I've noticed a little bit. The one thing that I've noticed with the women is they definitely look across the way to see what the men are making, and they immediately calibrate whether or not they're better at their sport than that guy who's getting paid more money than they are. So I think that's kind of like the two different ways that maybe they negatively look at the situation. Like, I'm the best softball player in America. He sucks at football. He's making more money than me. And it can cause some challenges and some angst. You know, no doubt about it. But I think, like, when it comes to, like, the public appearances, I've never heard of a collective or a business upset that the woman didn't show. We have heard of businesses that were upset that the guy didn't show.
Okay, thank you so much.
Let's go to Lauren and then Jetsy.
Hi, just one more question for me. Have you had any complications or complaints from coaches who've come to the athletic department because they've had issues with, like, their players and their NIL deals, or like a change in how the players are competing or viewing their sport?
Not on the latter. I've not heard somebody like, oh, since they got their NIL deal, they don't practice hard anymore. Their complaints are usually, this is another reason I like it disclosed, which it actually just makes my job easier, which is, you know, the reason you should do everything is to make it easier for management. No, I'm just kidding. But the coaches believe all the ghost stories too. Penn State's AD used to work here, and he said the Penn State basketball coach was convinced that Trace Jackson Davis had a $3 million NIL deal, which I promise you is grossly exaggerated. So we get calls from our coaches all the time. Everybody on Tennessee baseball is making $100,000. I'm like, well, not everybody on IU basketball is making $100,000. There's no way that everybody on Tennessee baseball, you're telling me that the 28th player on Tennessee baseball is making $100,000. So I think the coaches' angst is that they're falling behind some competitor that they're recruiting against. They're much higher on I need more than thank you for what we got. But that's my cross to bear. That's why I have a job. Jetsy.
Hi, I'm so sorry for any noise that you might hear in the background.
No, it's all right. Drop it.
Thank you. I'm sorry?
Drop a trash can and I just heard like a metal sound.
Yeah, I'm in a coffee shop, so there's another background.
All right, which one?
Starbucks.
Oh, come on, Jetsy, get adventurous. Drink real coffee rather than that other water.
My cousin convinced me to. So for my first question, you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but do you think that because student athletes can like pursue these NIL deals, do you think it makes the relationship with their fans stronger or weaker? And do you think it may encourage fans to support individual athletes rather than like their teams?
Good question. I do think that one way to get NIL is just to become much more active on digital social media. I do feel like the fans feel like they know the athletes better than they used to be. That they connect with them in a more organic way. And it could be everything. It can be serious. There's no value judgment on anything I'm going to say. But like, I know that Jewish fans have really responded to Yarden Gergerzon because she's actually kind of talking about her sister's experience living in Israel in this really rough time. But then I also see like, oh, Mike Koenig, the center on the football team, who treated himself like a glazed donut on TikTok on Monday, is a really funny guy. He's kind of somebody I'd like to follow. I think they're seeing the personality of the athletes more. So I do think that establishes a stronger connection. As far as like feeling stronger about the athletes than the program itself, there's always going to be that. Like, I follow Steph Curry, but I'm not a fan of the Golden State Warriors. I follow Mookie Betts, even though I'm a Cardinals fan. I follow Patrick Mahomes, yet I want the Chiefs to lose every game. I think people follow people. It's an old Jerry Seinfeld joke. Otherwise, you'd just be rooting for clothes. You don't know any of these people, but they wear the clothes that you like, so you root for that team. I think people naturally follow people. But college is different. It's personal. So this is what I call kind of our target fan base. You know, they buy their IU clothes at Target because they're from Indiana and they love that IU represents the state of Indiana. We're the Hoosier State. They love IU because of it. That's a strong geographic tie to the team. And then all of you, if you end up rooting for us later on, it's because of your memories being in an assembly hall or Memorial Stadium as a college student loving your IU years. So I don't have really any fear that they're going to fall in love with the athlete more than the school going forward. Because I just think college is just kind of an idyllic time. I'm saying this as you guys are probably at midterms and are hating your classes, all that kind of stuff. But you're going to remember sleeping in, the late night dorm conversation, a fun night at upstairs, spring break trips, a lot of freedom, relatively little responsibility. It's a glorious time, and it's tough to pull fans away from that glorious time. I think it's why they like coming back. No shade, I'm sure your classes are hard. Isabella Wilson, fire away.
Hi. So I guess my question is, like, what criteria do you think determines whether a college athlete receives NIL? Like, do you believe that all college athletes should receive NIL or just specific ones?
Interesting question. I don't think all athletes should receive NIL. Your name, image, or likeness needs to be worth something in order to merit being paid for.